Okay, so I'll start just for a second because I see, besides Sari, I don't think I know anyone else here. So I'll just give a background for myself for a second. My name's Janice. I live in, let me add someone else. I live in Israel in Modi'in, and I have a background in psychology and as well as Tanach. So that was sort of the idea, a little bit of the class is sort of to unite those two mediums, those two subjects. And the title of the series that we're starting, which I'm very excited about, and I want to talk for a couple of minutes before we get into it. I want to talk about just why I chose this topic, what we're going to be doing in, I think it's about a 12 or 13 week series. So I just want to, give a little background of that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll get into the topic. So basically, I keep saying I'm sorry. The topic is the series is called Exploring Midot through the Tanach. So what I wanted to do was take the topic of Midot, of characteristics and attributes. That's how we usually translate it, and really go into that in terms of using the Tanakh, using the stories in the Tanakh, and the people in the Tanakh as a springboard to talk about those topics and those issues. And I really thought it was important. I mean, it's always important, there's many books over the centuries written on avodat hamidot and changing one's character or perfecting one's character, not necessarily changing it, but perfecting one's character. Like, this is not a new subject of study. There's many books in the area. But what I really wanted to do was, and why I thought it was important, is to look at it, number one, as from a springboard of Tanakh, because I think that those stories and those people that we read about, they were codified for a reason. They were written down. There was many stories over the history that could have been chosen to put in the Tanakh, and these stories in the Tanakh were chosen for continuous learning and taking messages and lessons from many generations later. So that's why I wanted to use that as a springboard. But also the idea of going into our midot right now, it's always important, but I think that it's even more important now, because we're living in a time that's so high stress and so uncertain. And we see as individuals and as a society, as a collective, how little control we have over the circumstances in our life. And the only true thing that we have control over is how we react to those circumstances. So I think that if we do, that anyone, myself included, I also chose this topic to work on myself. Whenever I choose a topic for a series I'm going to do, it's also something that I want to personally learn more about and work on. So this is definitely, all this preparing and teaching is also, if not more so, for me and to working on myself. So I think it's something that we definitely need. And I think here I'm going to share the screen just to show some ideas. But there's hold on, where's my slideshow? Okay, so the idea of, I want to go back to what I was saying before about the idea of the fact that we have such a limited control over our lives, but what we do have control over is our reaction. So even though we might not be able to control a situation, and it might not be the situation that we want, there's these two views of how we view that in psychology. It's called the locus of control. And there's an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. And it's really what it sounds like, but the external locus of control is when you attribute, I don't want to say the word blame, but you attribute any outcome in your life to fate or to something independent of you. For example, if someone doesn't get a job that they want, and they don't think that, they say, oh, the interviewer was not a nice person and they didn't give me enough credit, or it was a bad place to work anyway and I shouldn't have worked there. Or if someone does poorly on a test, it's because the test was skewed and the teacher wasn't fair, not because anything to do with me. And the internal locus of control is the opposite, where you look inside yourself and say, what did I do to affect and determine this decision, this situation, this outcome? So in the terms of a test, you could say, okay, I did poorly on this test. Maybe I didn't study enough. Maybe I need to look at the information differently next time. Or for a job interview, what did I do wrong in the job interview? Or what could I, not necessarily what I did wrong, but what can I do better next time? And I think that I think that they're very extreme. Obviously, they're the two extreme opposites. But I think that we sort of have to come to sort of balance of when do we look at things in our life and say that is something that's outside of me that I can control, and when do I look at something inside me and say this is something I can control and I should work on bettering it or improving it or changing it, however it may be. This is just a cute little image that I saw that I liked. And someone with an internal locus of control is very active, and someone with an external locus of control is more passive and more defeatist and more victim mentality. I don't know if anyone who was here, I gave a class a while back that had to do with a lot the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. This is also very connected to our ability to see, do we have the potential to change, or is this how I am? Right. And I think I'm giving this whole a little bit of a long-winded introduction and a psychological background in the sense of the ability to really refine our midah and work on our characteristics is not something simple, because you could view it and say, I was born this way, I have this attribute, or you want to point fingers at someone else and say, oh, they were born this way, they're an angry person, they're a judgmental person, they're or the opposite, or they're a really nice person, they're a really kind person, but that's just how they are. It's not about the work they did on themselves, right? So what I want to really talk about now is that yes, people are born with certain tendencies and with certain baseline reactions to things, but that doesn't mean that it has to be the only reaction. So this is what I really want to talk about through different midot that we're going to go through, about how we could see how to balance it and improve and work on our own midot and the way we look at other people's. And it's not an easy task. And I found this quote that I really liked, that a person wants to become a scholar and a leader overnight and to sleep that night as well. A lot of us want the outcome without putting in the work. And when you're talking about someone's character, this is a lifelong work, right? People they're born, you want to talk about nature versus nurture in psychology. And, obviously everyone, will come to the conclusion that on some level, it's all, there is obviously effects of both. But in the end of the day, if anyone wants to produce any positive or productive change in their life, it's going to take work. And it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen easy. It's going to be a constant, as with anything. If anyone has, as kids, you have 2 steps forward, 1 step back with certain things, like with aggression. I'm just thinking about that because, like, I'm potty training my son now. He's 2.5, and you have a week they go with no accidents, and it's great, and then all of a sudden they have a couple of accidents, and it's normal, and that's development. We move forward, we move back, and the same thing. I'm looking at it on that little base level of a toddler, but on our own in our own reactions and views of the world, we also could go through that back and forth of going, especially in this time of going through a very working on ourselves and going through a very growth period, and then we sort of sometimes could go backwards, and that's the process of change and growth. So now that I gave that whole idea and introduction, what I want to talk about tonight, what midah I want to talk about tonight is, before I actually talk about that, I want to just mention, we can't talk about midah without bringing in, I didn't bring the quote, I forgot, but the idea of the Rambam, where he talks about how in order to change or to adjust any mindset or midah, you have to go from one extreme to the other, and then you end up in the middle. So this idea of in order to really change, you have to sometimes go above and beyond for a certain period of time, like to a crazy extreme, and then you'll end up in a balance level with any midah. So what I chose, what I wanted to start with tonight, and I'll sort of summarize at the end of why I chose to start with this midah. Well, I guess I'll obviously throw things in the middle, but what I wanted to start with tonight is the idea of judging people favorably, dan l'kav zchut, fairly or favorably, however you want to translate it, but. And the source of that, or one of the sources, is when in talks in Vayikra, it has a long list of different prohibitions and different commandments. And one of them is lo tasu avel hamishpat, lo tiseh pnei dal, velo tedar pnei gadol, b'sedek tishpot amitecha. So it talks about when you're judging people, don't do a skewed judgment, but but and don't choose to favor the rich person over the poor person. Do the right thing, do the tzedek, do the tzedakah, and don't be swayed by outer things that you see. And that's sort of the base idea. And when it's talking about not only to judges, but all of us, don't don't favor a certain person or think they're better because of what you see on the outside. You don't necessarily know what's going on the inside and what the big picture is. So the first example that I want to bring from the Tanakh about this is actually that when God himself does this. Now, the story is obviously, I mean, not obviously, but I'm going to take for granted that this story is anthropomorphized. God is all knowing. It's not a philosophy class right now, but we're going to sort of take the not a class on the Ikarim, but we're going to sort of take the for granted that God is all knowing, God is all powerful, God doesn't need to check or balance anything. He sees what's going on constantly. But this story, the way it's written, which I'm going to talk about now, is a story that is giving us a lesson in how we have to view the society and the people and judge them. So it's a story of Sodom, right? When Sodom is doing atrocities and God wants to go and destroy Sodom because of how bad they are. And it says, the screams of Sodom are very, very strong. God says, I'm going to go down and examine the situation to see if the sa'aka, if what I'm hearing, like the rumors and the things that are going on, if it's really that bad. And obviously, for those who know, the story does end with the destruction of Sodom. God did see how bad they were, obviously, and judge them accordingly. So judging favorably, we see here, or fairly, doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be a positive outcome. It means it's going to be a fair outcome and the right outcome. So but the main point here is we have to see the full picture. We can't take hearsay. We can't take a snapshot. We have to see the full picture of what's going on before we can make a judgment. Another story that is from the Nevi'im and Sefer Yoshua, where we see that a large scale civil war was about to break out because of misjudgments, and it was avoided because the proper people took the proper precautions and examined the situation before. So a little background is that Reuven, the 12 tribes, when they were going into the land, Reuven, Gad, and half of Shevet Menashe asked Moshe if they could have land on the eastern side of the Jordan, because it was very good for the cattle. It had a pasture land, and they wanted to live there. They made a deal with him, basically, that we're going to go fight, we're going to establish the land, but we're going to live here. And Moshe makes them promise that they'll still follow God, they'll still help in Israel, and they're all for it. And when Yoshua, after conquering the land, and after settling the land, they go and they settle in their land in the other side of the Yarden. And it is heard through the grapevine that they built a mizbeach, they built an altar. Now, all the other shvatim they get ready to, here, this is what I was, when Yoshua leaves them off, he says, Rak shimru me'od la'asod ha'mitzvah ve'et ha'torah asher tzivah atchem Moshe. Make sure you follow the Torah. Lehov et Hashem, lalechet b'drachav, l'shmon mitzvotav, right? Be close to God, listen to what he says, and don't leave his ways. And Yoshua blesses them, and they go. And then, like I said before, they hear that the other tribes hear that they're building a monument and altar, and they think that it's an altar for idolatry, for avodah zarah. And when I bolded the pasuk, that's really the main point here is Vayishmu b'nei Israel, Vayikalu kol edat Israel b'nei Israel, Shilo lasot aleim l'sava. They hear this and they automatically gather for war, and they're ready to go fight because they think they're leaving God, and they want to go punish them and say, you have to, get them to be on the right track. And before they do this, Pinchas the Kohen sends a entourage of people to go examine what's going on and ask them what happens. And they give, I brought a lot of sukkim, but basically the answer they give is, no, we are not leaving God. We made this altar because we are afraid that in the next generation, when our children ask us and they say, what's our connection to those people on the other side of the Yarden, we will tell them our connection is through God and his through mitzvah. And this Mizbeach, this altar, is not an altar of worship. It's an altar as a matzeva, as a monument, so that we can instill these values and remember them and teach them to our children. And because of this, because of the proper examination and questioning and judgment and not running to judgment, they could have just automatically went to attack. They didn't need to send. They didn't need to send the people to examine and ask them what's going on. They thought to themselves they had a right, but the leadership took the proper precaution and judged the situation effectively, avoiding a major civil war. So we see here how judgment is how, when you look, one of the main factors in having a proper judgment and being able to judge someone favorably is looking at the whole picture. And obviously only God could look at the whole picture, but we still have to, as humans, examine as much as we can and understand as much as we can before we reach a conclusion. Now we see also on the flip side, I'm going to bring in now some stories in Tanach where people did not do this and it led to problems. So when you're not judging favorably or looking at the big picture, many times this will lead to problems that could have been avoided. One of the main stories that we see, I just did a series on this, so it's obviously fresh in my mind, in Sefer Shmuel, is the story of Shaul and David. Shaul is, he jumps to the conclusion that David wants to kill him, even though if he does even the minute examination, he sees that it's wrong, and David has nothing against him. It is proven time and time again. I mean, I could bring, do a whole class just on that, but I just brought a couple of psukim here where Yonatan, Shaul's son, goes to him and says, why are you chasing David? Lo chatalach lach ki masav tov lecha me'od. He didn't do anything bad to you. If anything, the opposite. He's doing only good to you. He's saying he's bringing salvation. He's fighting our enemies. God's helping him. Why would you want to fight him? He has nothing. Look at the picture. Look what's going on. He's doing nothing against you. If anything, he's doing everything good for you. And at this point, we'll see. It's a whole back and forth of Sefer Shmuel. Feel free to go listen to the series. But he obviously, Shaul hears it and he takes it for a minute and he says, no, I won't do anything to him. And then 5 seconds later, he goes and tries to kill him again. So that's just an interesting thing that we see, is that Shaul specifically has his pride and his fear and his paranoia, all things that we could discuss, in further, lessons in this series of Midot, and he lets them destroy himself and not judge favorably and not have a positive outcome of what could be this relationship with him and David, and it destroys him and ultimately brings him his death. Same book, but different characters. The story of Eli and Hannah, where we learn that, I'll say the story and then we'll see what we learn from it. Eli is the Kohen HaGadol. He's the high priest. He's in the Mishkan, and he sees Hannah, who's Shmuel's mother, but she's barren at the time, and she's praying to God for a child. She is so distraught that she is just mumbling her words, mumbling her prayers. She can't even get them out. So Eli takes that mumbling for her being a drunk, and he goes up to her and he says, where's the actual word? Hasir et yanech ma'alech, drop the bottle, stop drinking, stop being a drunkard. And she tells him not. First of all, we see two major important things from the story. Number one is she explains herself. She doesn't let her name get tainted for something that is not valid. She says, no, I am not drunk. I am isha kshet ruach anochi, yain v'shachar lo shatiti, v'ashpoch nafshi lefnei Hashem. She's saying, no, I am not a drunk person. I am so distraught. I am kshat ruach. I am so, broken down that I'm pouring my soul before God. And please don't think of me as, lifnei bat b'li'al. Don't think I'm an evildoer. Because of my anger and my sadness, I became like this. And Eli hears this, and he immediately says, Lechi leshalom, ve'Elohei Yisrael yiten et shelatech asher sha'alti meimo. And God should grant whatever you asked him to you. So very important things that we see from this story that I think is the takeaway of this story specifically. Number one, Hannah is an amazing character. Definitely, maybe we'll look into her later in the series. She's really a really, really inspiring character. But we see that when Eli misjudges her, she defends herself not in an arrogant way, in a very modest way. She calls herself Amatecha, your servant. She's very respectful. She doesn't say, "Who do you think you are?" She defends herself in a very respectful way, but she protects and maintains her good name. She's saying, "Don't think of me as a low life, as a nobody. Realize where I'm coming from." And she explains herself. And it's important to realize that if any of us hears a rumor or something that's not true about us, it's not, maybe we could think, oh, just brush it off, it's not important. But no, a name, Shem Tov is something very important. Your good name is a very important thing, that if we have the ability to correct it in a positive, respectful way, that we should be doing that. And even more so, Eli's reaction is, he doesn't ask her what she prayed for. He doesn't ask her why she's so distraught. He just takes her word and says, God should give you whatever you ask for. He has no idea what she asked for. He could be 100 million things that she asked for. He doesn't know. And he blesses her. So we see that if we, as fallible human beings, misjudge someone else, we need to rectify that and flip that and make it something positive and give them, bless them. And we're not necessarily give them a blessing, but put them in a positive light and correct the wrongdoing that we did in tainting their name, which is obviously not an easy thing to do. So this is obviously something. Before we go on, we see also that Vayomer Hashem el Shmuel, when Shmuel is picking the king, and this is talking about picking the king, but it could apply to just any visual, any looking at a person. God tells him, don't look at how he looks and his height and how attractive he is. I don't want him. I don't want this person to be king. He was looking at one of David's other brothers. People see with our eyes, but God sees to the heart, to what the essence of the person is. And I think that we have to always put that like quote, I think always, before we think anything or say anything about another person, we have to say and realize, I am a limited human being. Only God knows the full picture. Only God knows the full context of this person's life, of what's actually going on. How am I able to fully judge it? And it's a little bit sad that today, on the flip side, that because we know as humans that people are judging us by our outer exteriors and what we act like, on the surface, and maybe not our true intentions, that we could maybe play this game and look a certain way and act a certain way so that people think a certain thing of us, but not really change from within ourselves as well. So it's a flip, it's a double-sided coin. It's for our intentions in judging other people to realize this, but also our view of ourselves and the actions we choose and the mindset we choose because of what others will think of us versus what God will think of us and what ultimately the truth about us is, as opposed to what people are seeing. So I think that's a very important, I really think this pasuk is really something that we really have to think in the forefront of our mind before we judge anyone else or before we judge ourselves. Also, because of the fact that we are subjective human beings. We are very easy. Well, I'll talk about this in a second, but I'll talk about that in a second. We are very quick to judge ourselves favorably and judge the other one not favorably. What do I mean by that? If I'll give an example. If you, for example, aren't feeling well, and you tell your friend, oh, I really don't feel well, or even let's say take it to an extreme, you had to stay in the hospital or go to the emergency room or whatever it may be, and you tell your friend and they know that, but then they don't check up on you, or they don't come visit you or whatever it may be, and you could think, oh, they're so self-centered, like I told them that I didn't feel well, I told them I had to go to the ER or whatever it may be, and they didn't want to come, they're so selfish, they didn't care, how did they not check on me? But when it's reversed, let's say, and your friend, on the other hand, is in that position, and you don't go visit them or you don't call them, you justify and say, oh, I had so many things going on and my work and my kids and my life. Like they know that I wanted to go visit them or call them, but I just couldn't. Right? We're very quick to do that on the flip side about us, but point the finger at someone else. And we have to sort of realize and be honest with ourselves about that balance. And something that another quote that I saw that was I thought really stuck with me is in forming opinions of a person, we usually ignore his overall behavior and consider only whether he is kind to us. We often what we often do, however, is magnify the faults that affect us and minimize or ignore the virtues that affect numerous other people. So I think what the takeaway from this is that because, again, because we are limited, subjective human beings, it's very easy to see how someone makes me feel, but not to look and say how they really are acting to the world and the general population around them. Because I could have someone that really that's really nice to me, but really acting cruelly or not unfairly or whatever it may be to other people. And we have to really make sure not to be blinded by that. By the way, I forgot that the Hachamim talk about the fact that we shouldn't always be judging someone for the good. We should judge them fairly, like I said before, but not always for the good. Meaning, if there's a person that is constantly doing evil things, we shouldn't be naive and stupid and say, oh, let's try to find a way to rectify the situation and say it really was good. No, if they are constantly doing evil acts, the Hamim say the opposite. The rabbis say, if we see someone that is known to be an evil person that is constantly doing bad things and they're doing a good thing, we have to say, what are they doing this good thing for? They're probably having ill intentions and they're trying to manipulate a situation poorly. So this idea of judging favorably doesn't mean that we should be blind. No, opposite. We should be really focusing on looking at the biggest context that we can, because that's the only way to judge fairly and judge properly. And if we see that a person is not the way that they should be, then we have every right to judge them accordingly and stay away from them. That's a whole nother another discussion of how to connect to people and connecting to positive versus negative people. But if we see someone that we judge and we see accordingly that is really not a good person, the Rambam says we have to get away from, well, not only the Rambam, a lot of rabbis say get away from them and don't connect to these people. So we also have to realize that that is a very important thing to do and not to be naive as well. Another thing I think we do as people, as individuals, is a lot of times we'll judge not the way we judge ourselves very more favorably than others. It also works on the flip side of our loved ones and our closest family members and our closest loved ones, our spouses, our children, our parents, our siblings, that we're very quick to be critical of them. It's actually like a catch-22, but because we know them so well, we're very quick to be critical of them and say, why did they do this and how did they do that, when we're really not being as objective as we could because it affects us so much. So in that idea, I'll take this other quote of, remember that you are not as good as you think you are, and the world is not as bad as you think it is, right? We have to have this balance of not thinking and judging myself so perfectly all the time, but also not thinking that everyone out there is out to get me as well. We have to really try to balance that and be honest with ourselves as much as we can. So basically what I want, and to sum all this up and to why I chose this topic to start with, is that I think, like I said a little bit in the beginning about the idea of midot in general, but the reason I chose this topic is we're in such a polarized world right now. I think that there is not any person that, in politics, with Corona, with anything, we're so polarized. And many people will think my way's right. And if someone disagrees with me and thinks that that politician is better or worse, or if they should or shouldn't take the vaccine or whatever it may be, everyone is so convicted in their views that they don't even see a little opening to say, well, maybe that person has a little bit of validity. Not that I need to go on their side, not that I need to agree with them, not that I need to do what they're saying, even though I disagree with it, but to not have this animosity and this conviction that I'm always right and everyone else is always wrong. And these things, I mean, I brought like two, major things that are going on in the world now, but even take, regular pandemic things of just people's view of religion or politics, or the way you run your family or raise your kids or your relationship. Everyone has very strong ideas of these things, and we're very quick to judge and tell people, well, you should do it this way, and I know this way is better, and I did this with my child, or my relationship is like this, and that's why you should do this. And we're quick to do that, as opposed to really looking at, where is this person coming from? What is their context? What is their rationale? And this doesn't mean that we have to say that everyone's right and agree with everyone, but it does mean, I mean, that we should respect everyone, and hear each other as people that are people that are a reflection of God. And part of this world is to be a tikkun olam, and to build the connections, right? To keep creating, right? To keep being a partner in God's creation, and create these relationships and create this growth. And I think we can't do that without proper judgment. And I think even more so is that we live in a world now, and even more in the past, 9 months to a year, that we're so focused on a screen and social media, and not even seeing people face to face. Even this class now, right? Some of you have your cameras on, some of you don't. I'm talking to black screens, and that's fine. I'm not, whatever, everyone needs to do what they need to do. But what I'm saying is, it's a very different feeling to give a class and to be involved in a class with people on the computer versus a face-to-face, or all in the same room. And you take that even further to the way we just constantly are scrolling on social media, and looking at Instagram, and looking at Twitter, and looking at all these snapshots, these limited snapshots of what people's lives are. And we think we know them, and we judge them. And these are people we never met and we never spoke to, and we think we know everything about them, but we're seeing a 30-second, clip of what they're going on in their day. And we don't know the 20,000 other things they did in the day. So I think that our culture and our society is breeding these rash, quick judgments, with limited context, like the most limited context that we could find. A post on Instagram, or a quote or something that someone posts on Twitter, and we're so limited to that we don't even think. And if you look at these, some of these Twitter threads or these comments on Instagram, like, they destroy these people. And there's comments of these people that you never even met them. You don't know what they're going through in your life. What are you to judge them, right? And I think that that's a little bit extreme, an extreme example, but we could take that even to our daily lives, of someone we interact with that we, saw in the store, or had a meeting with, and we automatically jump to this judgment about them without realizing the full context. So what I want to, sum this all up, and I said sum it up a couple times, so I'm sorry, but what I want to end with is from Kohelet, where Shlomo Melech says, he's Chacham mikol Adam, and he says, Ki Adam en sadik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yichteh, that there's no man in the world, human, not man, but human in the world, that is infallible, that didn't sin. And we have to think that of ourselves and of other people, and give everyone the proper judgment. And in Pirkei Avot, there's most people know this, obviously, and you could quote this, and I just want to give a little bit of a different spin on it. It says, "Ve'eved dan et kol ha'adam lekaf zechut." And most people will translate this as, we should judge all people favorably. And that is one, way to read it. But you could also read it, "Heved dan et kol ha'adam lekaf zechut." View the whole person, judge the whole person, to kaf zechut. Not every person, but the whole person. The only way you will be able, or anyone will be able to judge a person with kaf zechut, fairly and favorably, and with the proper mindset, is if we see kol ha'adam. And it's a very hard thing to do, because especially now where we have limited relationships, unfortunately, but we have to really, I think that this is also, this is why I chose to start with this, is I think it's something that, unfortunately, we're very, very challenged with. Myself, like I said, this is also, main part for me, why I choose these ideas and topics. And I think that we have to really, really shift our mindset to being open to that, and looking at things in the fullest context that we can. So yeah, thank you for coming. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you'll join us in the series. I have a bunch of different midot and ideas that I want to talk about. but I'm obviously open to more. I'm going to put my email in the chat. If anyone has any specific, midah or idea that they wanna, they would like me to talk about or delve into, I'm very happy to take requests. So thank you, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Mom.
Great first class.
Thank you.